What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the all-new 2020 Chevrolet Corvette. Huge thanks to Chevrolet for bringing us out here to Spring Mountain Raceway to review the brand new Corvette for you guys today. So, about the Corvette. Well, it's probably the biggest car of 2020. Could very well be one of the biggest cars of the decade. I mean, this has been so hotly anticipated by so many people, and for good reason. I mean, the headline feature here is that you can get one of these that looks basically just like this for $59,995. 60 grand. And you don't even need to watch this review to know that getting this much performance, getting a mid-engine car that has supercar levels of performance for $60,000 is going to be one of the best performance bargains that we've ever seen, honestly. And so, anyway, as far as the looks here, well, I especially love this rapid blue color. It really pops, especially with the black accents. But the really dramatic thing, obviously, it's a wild departure from the old Corvette with the mid-engine setup, but it's also just transformed itself as far as the dimensions. It's 5.4 inches longer, so a much longer car than the C7. It's 2.2 inches wider, and even the track is 1.9 inches wider here in the front. It's 0.7 inches wider in the rear. The wheelbase itself is only a ½ inch longer, so not a dramatic departure there, but the bodywork and everything is just so radically different. But it is still pretty low too. It's even 0.2 inches lower than the C7, which is already a pretty low car. So I mean, it just gives you this very just spread out and just very, very wide and aggressive stance, and looks spectacular. This one in particular is the Z51 package as well, so that gives you a little bit of a more aggressive front splitter there. You have the rear spoiler in the back, and overall I really love the look of the C8 personally. I think it's really cool. One cool little touch too that we just learned this morning actually is you can pop this front hatch here. There's a little button right underneath here, just like there would be for the trunk, and you hit that and pops open your front hatch there, which is kind of brilliant and very convenient. You can also use the key and a button on the inside as well. And then going down to the sides, I love that huge side scoop. It's totally functional as well. Those scoops are how the intake works. That's where it gets the air for the engine. So you hear the fans going whenever you turn the car off and stuff. It's a very cool setup there, and that's also where the door handle is hidden. It's very discreet the way that it's hidden in there. And then going out to the back, I love how they have the mid-engine on display. You just have it right under glass there. It's really beautiful. Unfortunately, with a convertible, you don't get that. So coupe is the only way to get that very nice glass display, and it looks really good there. It's nicely dressed up as well with the engine cover and stuff. But otherwise, out back, it still looks really good. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of the way it looks without the spoiler. I think the spoiler really makes the back end, and that's something you get here on the Z51. But I think especially with the spoiler, it looks really good out back there. And it's, again, very evolutionary. They're very respectful of, Corvette styling cues, and they wanted to keep it very signature with, the tail lamps and things like that. And I think they did a very good job of doing that. And so overall, I mean, this thing stands out so much too. We were driving around yesterday on the Las Vegas Strip, and I mean, everyone's looking, everyone's taking pictures, giving you thumbs up. I mean, this is going to be the car, especially of this year. I mean, everyone is going to love you whenever you're driving around in this thing. It is really, really cool. Right, so the interior of the mid-engine Corvette, well, it is so crazy and just, it's so exciting to sit in here. Obviously, the seating position is also completely different than a C7. You're sitting 16.5 inches further forward than you would be in a C7. Anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats. Now, these are the GT2 seats, so these are the mid-grade seat. There's also the competition ones, which are more aggressive. I really love these GT2 seats. I was sitting in these all day yesterday. We were doing the road drive yesterday, and you'll see that footage here in a few minutes. But these seats are super comfortable. They have adjustable lumbar. They also have adjustable bolstering, which is very nice. And so it mostly just does your torso here, but really you can make it as loose or as tight as you like, and very comfortable, all day comfortable seats. I really, really love these a lot. The C8 steering wheel is also very cool and a radical departure from the rest. So it has a great 9/3 grip, but it's this like squarish design, and so 10 and 2 notches are really high up. But they did that specifically so that you could see this gauge cluster perfectly well. The steering wheel nicely gets out of the way, and just a few buttons here on it, not too many. You have a little metal Z button here, which is kind of like tied into the My mode, so it can you can customize everything, and it'll save that between key cycles for the My mode. But the Z mode, you have to hit it every time to get it into that mode. And you also have nice metal paddle shifters on the back. They're like very cold to the touch, and nice and large as well, and really well done there, and a really great steering wheel. I believe on some higher trims you can also even get some stitching here on the airbag cover and stuff. This one doesn't have that. Still looks very nice though. You can also get a heated steering wheel here. But that gauge cluster, it is very nice looking, very high resolution, 12 inches switches, and has really cool animations whenever it comes on, and it is really just feature packed too. GM is so good at doing so many customizations as far as what you can show there, and this is no different. So there's lots of different things you can go through there as far as seeing whatever metrics you'd like. All the vital information is already just standard there on the screens though, and it does change between different drive modes. So sport mode's a little more aggressive looking, and then track is really aggressive with a bar style tack there, and looks very cool. But as you might be noticing as I'm switching between drive modes, it's a little laggy and a little slow, and whenever you're driving on the road, that's a little distracting because you have this like 5-second transition period before you actually are set. And so not a big deal if you're just looking up at the road. You also do have a heads-up display, speaking of gauges, and so that'll show you your tack and also several other things there, and you can customize that as well, and that's really great to have. That is an option though, I don't believe that's standard. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, you have the 8-inch Chevrolet MyLink touchscreen, pretty standard, and that's actually standard across all C8s. All of them have standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. All that kind of stuff is great, and it's really impressive. So before I talk about this infotainment system, I actually sat in the base $60,000 car with no options yesterday, and you can see I have a few little shots of that interior, and it's basically very, very similar. I was shocked how you still have like padding by your knee area like you do here in this nicer equipped version, and really it basically is mostly the same. The seats don't have as much adjustability. You also don't have heating and ventilation like you do here on this one as an option, but otherwise so there's just a few less buttons here on the center tunnel, but other than that it is basically very, very similar. I thought there was going to be a huge downgrade in interior quality in that base model to make that $60,000 price tag, but they didn't. And they say that everything in this interior that you see, by the way, if it looks like leather, it's leather. If it looks like metal, it's real metal. Very, very impressed with that. But anyway, getting back to this infotainment screen, this is the only thing that, I love this screen. It's super fast, super quick. Like I said, I love the smartphone integration. Very simple and easy to use as well, which is refreshing with a lot of other European competitors having very convoluted infotainment systems. This is just refreshingly simple. I love it. The only thing I don't love about it is where they put the volume knob. It's all the way up here, and you actually kind of have to reach around your windshield wiper stalk in order to get to that volume knob, and the home button there as well. So, with the driver, it's not a big deal because you have little rocker switches here on the steering wheel to change the volume if you want. But if that volume knob is mainly for the passenger, not only do they have to reach all the way over to basically your gauge cluster in order to get to that volume knob, they also have to reach over this pretty significant pillar here, which especially towards the top gets pretty tall. So if you're a passenger in a C8 Corvette, it's not going to be very convenient to change the volume. So you're going to want to just tell the driver to do that instead. And then beneath that, you have your little buttons here, which are very cool the way they're crafted here for going into park, neutral, drive, reverse, all that kind of stuff. Manual mode is there as well. And also this mode selector is way nicer than it has to be. I mean, honestly, you could have a little cheap switch, but they didn't. They have this nice, large, knurled aluminum knob and this little leather cover over top of it. You also have a couple buttons here for traction control off and camera. Also, this car does not have the front lift option, but that button would be here as well if you had that. But yeah, I mean, this whole center tunnel is pretty nice and softly padded. It's not super cushy soft, but it does have a little bit of give to it, so resting your knee on that's going to be a little more comfortable than hard plastic like you'd have in the past. But this center tunnel also, all feels very nice in this area. Like I said, you'll see all the buttons for your climate control, and there are many of them, but honestly, with auto climate control, being standard, you're just going to set it and forget it, and so you don't need to really mess with this a whole lot. So I kind of like how they kind of just put it off there onto the side, and you don't really have to think about it too much. Also in this area, you have two cup holders, which aren't the deepest cup holders, but do seem to be a pretty good size, so no complaints really there. You also have a center armrest here, which is pretty nice and softly padded, and you open that up, and you have a decent amount of space, enough for a smartphone or something, not too deep, but still not too bad. You also will see a standard USB jack, a USB-C jack, and an auxiliary jack in there, as well as an SD card slot, but a great little space there that's also felt lined, so things won't really rattle in there. And then you also do have this space behind you here, and so that is a wireless charging pad here, if so equipped. I believe the base models, that's just going to be an extra little bin, but a nice little cutout there to hold your phone in there and keep it nicely out of the way so you're not worrying about it. And you also see a nice speaker grill here, which is metal for the Bose Performance Series speaker, which is an upgraded stereo system you get here. There's also I believe a lower Bose system, so this is the top one, and didn't get to try it out too much. We were too busy listening to the engine yesterday, but You know, nice that they do have that option. I'll have to hopefully get one of these for a week to really test out the stereo and things like that. But yeah, and so I mean, overall, you know, as far as space in here too, you know, I'm 5'9". I don't even have this seat as low as it'll go. It can go lower here. But even still, so this is as low as it goes. I have tons of headroom, a decent amount of elbow room and stuff. You're not too tight in here. I'd say it's even a little more spacious than a C7, just in my first initial impression, I think. And I also love, you look over your shoulder there and you have a fantastic view of the engine, which is great. But because that view is, you know, mostly engine and not much glass there, this one does have the optional, you can get a camera rear view mirror, which I highly recommend, because without it, as you can see, it's not a great view, especially this one with the high spoiler on it. It's not going to be a great view out of there, so I think that's definitely an option worth getting. But yeah, overall, the interior here in the C8 is very, very nice and just so different and cool, and I love that they just did a wild departure and were bold with their design. Cargo space in the C8 is also really good. So you can see up front here, you have a nice deep space there, and very usable, but I'm just impressed with how deep that is. And then out back, you have enough space for golf clubs if you'd like, and a very wide space there. Now, if you do take the roof off, because that is an option, then that does block off most of that rear space, so you'd only have the front space to work with. But overall, I mean, still tons of cargo capacity here, and very, very good for a mid-engine vehicle. All right, so start and go for a drive. So don't mind the stickers, but this is the key to the mid-engine Corvette. Very nice. Again, real cold metal here on the edges of it and stuff. Very high quality. Nice buttons there in the back to open all the hatches and do the remote start, all that kind of stuff if you'd like. But a very nice key. It has a nice weight to it. Very high quality feeling. It's definitely much different than other GM keys, so very impressive there. But of course, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it roars to life. All right, so we're here for the street drive portion of the 2020 Corvette Media Drive here. And I'm gonna just start it off with the part I know you guys are all looking forward to seeing, and that is my first acceleration reaction. So we're in track mode. I'm gonna leave it in auto. We're not doing launch control. We'll do that tomorrow at the track. But here we go. 3, 2, 1. Drama or fuss there. It just took off. Very impressive and so smooth too. So the 2020 Corvette here runs the LT2 6.2 liter V8 engine, naturally aspirated but direct injection. It does 495 horsepower performance exhaust and then 470 pound-feet of torque. And so 0 to 60 for the Z51 equipped vehicles is 2.9 seconds. This one is not a Z51 package. This one has the all-season Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tires on it, and so with these, it's maybe a couple tenths of a second slower. I think they said maybe 3.1 or 3.2. Still very, very quick, and that would be with launch control, so I was probably a little slower than that, just me doing it here from a normal 0 to 60 run. But very, very smooth. But we'll go ahead and put it into the sport mode here because I think that's a little bit more street friendly. So it's running an 8-speed Tremec dual clutch transmission as the only transmission choice for the 2020 Corvette. No manual. I'm a manual lover. It is a bummer that they don't offer it, but this dual clutch so far has been very good. So we actually were driving through Las Vegas Boulevard and stuff earlier in this, and one thing I've noticed already is that there is a little bit of an engagement point you can notice. It's not totally seamless like it is in some of the more refined dual clutches that I've experienced so far. I know even just a couple of months ago I drove the GT500. That seemed to have a slightly smoother dual clutch as far as engagement goes. As far as speed goes, this seems very similar. So we'll go ahead and put it in the manual mode here. We're in 7th right now. And it's pretty quiet because we're in the lower RPMs, but it's very, very quick responding. And then there we go. We had some trash control going on there for a second, but then it takes off. And it's just insane that this is the base standard Corvette. This is not even the fast one. This is just the standard ordinary version, and the fact that it is already so fast. I mean, we're talking about supercar levels of acceleration in a car that is only starting at $60,000. You can have this performance for $60,000, like this one is equipped, you know, with the all seasons and everything like that. And the thing I love about the LT2 engine is it's just so torquey. So unlike other motors, even some turbocharged engines don't have as much low-end torque as this does immediately, because with this there is no lag or anything to wait for. You just put your foot down and it's very, very immediate. Brakes also are very responsive, but I've noticed that they're a little touchy, and it's reminded me of the Alfa Romeo Giulia with the way that can get a little tricky with being smooth with the brakes. And so that's something I'm going to continue to drive here over the next day and a half, and we'll report back after I've spent more time here in this. Try one with the windows down here. Oh, crackles and pops there. Yeah, this thing. Oh man. If this is already this good, I can't imagine the Z06 and the future versions of this are just going to be insane. It's like making my palms sweaty, guys. That's how impressive this is. Oh man. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah,
I have, sorry I didn't introduce you, but yeah, I have Tim from Chevy 150 here riding along today, and it's awesome even having you in the same car with me. I love your videos. You do fantastic work. And you haven't driven this yet, but how does it feel for the passenger seat?
I tell you what, so this was the first time actually accelerating hard.
Yeah.
It properly pushes you back.
Yeah.
Like the torque feel and kind of just the instant response slams the head into the seat.
Not even 500 horsepower.
No, it's
crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of car for the money. And I tell you, these seats are good as well. The middle seat setting.
Yeah, these are the GT2 seats we're sitting in right now, and yeah, they have adjustable bolstering to them, and they're really comfortable, and they feel actually a pretty nice quality leather and stuff. So another thing I'm noticing though about the 2020 Corvette is the visibility is very good in many respects. So, you know, because we're now mid-engine, it's got a much lower hood, and I mean, very good visibility. I don't think it's quite McLaren good. What do you think? You've owned McLaren, so.
I kind of know what you mean, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see you've got a good viewpoint over the wheel arches.
Yeah.
Good ability to position the front.
True.
The A-pillars are very, very narrow.
Yeah.
That's something that's really nice about this.
And that's very cool. I am noticing that the side mirrors are really a weird shape, and they're not great. Yeah.
A bit strange.
Yeah, and they're just the kind of, I don't know, I've just been struggling to like see people in the other lanes.
But that's because they have to go over the rear quarters, right?
Right.
You have to see over the quarters which sit higher because there's an engine back there.
Yeah, and the B-pillar is like right over my shoulder, so I can't really see a whole lot there. So I think getting the blind spot monitoring is a solid option that I would probably pick.
Camera's great though.
Yeah, camera rearview mirror is I think a first here for Corvette and from other GM and Cadillac vehicles and stuff. What do you think of the sound?
It's a nice deep grumble. In a world where just about everything on the market is muted by turbos or noise regulation, to have that naturally aspirated V8 grumble is something that's actually, we're lucky it's still here.
Right.
Yeah. To have that.
I'm glad someone's doing it.
Definitely.
And so yeah, we're going around a few corners here now, and these are very gentle sweeping corners, nothing too aggressive, but it handles itself very well. So regardless of whether you get the Z51 package or not, you still get 245 wide tires in the front. I believe they're 295s in the rear, and so you have very good grip. And honestly, I mean, yes, this is all season tires, and for a lot of enthusiasts, that's like a dirty word, but it's honestly not bad. These Michelin all seasons are some of the best all seasons as far as dry grip, wet grip, and being very, very good from a performance standpoint. So I kind of gave it the boot mid-corner there, and it's still stuck pretty well. So that's one of the perks of having the mid-engine setup now, is you have much more weight over those rear tires, so it really helps grip. I mean, if I would have tried to do that in a C7, I would have been really sideways. So that's the big difference. And I mean, the weight distribution is so much changed as well. It used to be close to 50-50. Now we're at 60% of the weight in the rear, basically, and then about 40% up front. So it's rear bias now, and you can tell it even with like the braking setup. The brakes are actually bigger in the back than they are in the front here to take advantage of that. Yeah, I'm really impressed with the paddle shifters. They're very quick. I do wish there was a little more RPM to play with. I know this motor is, just a big, small block V8 engine and stuff, but it'd be nice to have a higher red line. Hopefully they fix that with the Z06 version. So I'm noticing there's, obviously there's so much torque here. Torque comes on so early and everything, you don't need to have a super high red line. But from a sports car standpoint, it's kind of fun to have something that revs beyond, $6 grand, 6,500 like this does. honestly, I mean, this is plenty of power for anyone. It's so effective at the way that it deploys that 495 horsepower that you have to drive one of these and really feel it and experience it to get the full effect. I think this car is more than just its numbers. It has a very impressive 0 to 60 time, but if you look beyond that, some people might be like, well, you know, I'm waiting for the faster version. You might not need the faster version, because with this you can really work the whole engine, you can really exploit this car, and it's going to be plenty of fast to get into plenty of trouble if you'd like to, and you save yourself a bunch of money just going for one of the standard Corvettes here. It is a ton of fun. Pretty quick steering as well, so it's you know, it's not as fast of a steering ratio as like some of the fastest, you know, super sedans and things like that, or even like, you know, stuff like Ferrari and stuff has much quicker steering, but you know, this is still actually quicker steering than the old C7 Corvette as far as the you know, steering ratio, and lots of grip too. I mean, it's really good. It's nice and flat here in sport mode, and so you can get a couple different suspension options. You can get it with magnetic ride control 4.0, which is the newest version, or you can just get a standard suspension setup as well if you'd like. And the next day out at Spring Mountain, they actually had 2 cars there on a short little autocross course where we could test, one with the Z51 package without magnetic ride control and one with magnetic ride control with Z51. And so first out, I was in the non-magnetic ride control vehicle, and one thing I will say about the non-MR cars is that it's a little more organic feeling. You do have a little bit more roll and it's not quite as flat, but to me it felt a little more natural, and I think I actually preferred the way non-magnetic ride control felt. But then I went out in the magnetic ride control car, and it definitely was flatter and more composed. There was less drama in the suspension, and it really felt a little more buttoned down, and I felt like I could probably corner a little quicker in the MR car, and so I think it's definitely going to give you extra confidence. But personally, I think I still really prefer the feel of the non-MR car, and this is on an autocross course that's perfectly paved. One of the main benefits of the magnetic ride control is that it can also give you the softness of, you know, a more comfortable suspension setup for rougher roads, and so out on the street, the magnetic ride control may be, you know, the nicer option to have, but at least as far as autocross cars go, I think I preferred the normal Z51 suspension instead. For what most people are going to be doing with this, it's very confidence inspiring, very, very good. It's a very solid ride too. So the weight in these is about 150 pounds more than the C7, but you're getting a much longer vehicle, a wider vehicle. You have the dual clutch now, which is heavier, and all these things do add some weight. So the fact that it only went up about 150 pounds or so, to me, isn't really too bad. You're only at like 3,650 pounds or so, so it's not going to be super heavy. By modern standards, that's actually very light still. Now for, you know, some sports cars, especially supercars, use a lot of carbon fiber and stuff, that is on the heavier side, but considering this doesn't really have much carbon fiber in its construction or anything, I think that still is a pretty good weight, and I really like it. It gives it a solid feel going down the road, and so far I haven't felt the weight holding me back or making me feel like it's porky in any way or anything. It really is just flat, confident, composed handling. But then with the dual clutch transmission and its automatic mode, now we're in sport driving mode, but with the transmission doing its own thing, you know, it's cruising in 5th gear right now, about 55 miles an hour. And if I were to just stomp on it, very good response, very, very quick to respond. Now it's not hyper aggressive with holding onto gears or anything like that. Even in track mode, it didn't seem like it wanted to be too crazy with these stuff, so we're going to track here now, and it still is content to cruise at, you know, 2,500 RPMs. It's not hyperactive. But this transmission can figure out whenever you're trying to drive aggressively, supposedly, according to the materials that Chevy gave us, and it will try and predict your behavior, and I think that's something that will learn the driver as well. So obviously these press vehicles we're in with only 1,200 miles, probably the transmission will do a little bit of learning. You know, it takes a bit to do that. So I'm sure that will probably get better with time, but even as it is, really good. It's not getting confused. There's been some other dual clutches in the past, and even like the 10-speed automatic that you see in some other Ford and GM applications, that can get a little confused sometimes, and it wants to shift a lot. You know, this we have 8 speeds, but it's pretty dedicated to holding onto gears because you have so much low end torque. It doesn't need to hunt around. So even in track mode here, you know, it just picks a gear and sticks with it, so it really doesn't hunt around. And so I think it's programmed very well, even in its track setting. Also in track mode, you also can really feel how the steering gets a lot heavier. Sport's also a little bit lighter, but a little heavier than Tour. So there's all kinds of adjustability there. But even in track mode, the steering isn't too heavy, honestly. It really feels good. All right, so now we took the roof off here, and as you can hear, it's a little windy at some higher speeds with the roof off. Whenever you go some lower speeds, so we were doing like 55 there, so once you get close to 40, it's good, and then, you know, you can hear this glorious exhaust really well with the roof off. But then it quickly increases in volume. But it's really nice. Supposedly the guys at Chevrolet said that if you are looking for a quieter roof-off experience, they said that the convertible version of the C8 that's coming in April, that will be a little bit better as far as the noise goes. So if you do plan to drive with the roof off all the time, might be worth paying a few extra bucks more for that convertible version, but obviously I've not driven the convertible, so I can't say 100% that that will fix it. But just one thing to note, it is a little windier, but, you know, generally in convertibles, you know, most people are expecting some wind noise, and so, you know, it's a little hard to have a conversation whenever you're at some higher highway speeds. But it's great that you have the option, and it's a no-cost option. It's just every Corvette is target top, and I love that about it. So you can have as much or as little of a convertible experience as you want. So this car we're driving here does not have the magnetic ride suspension. This is just a, you know, more luxurious LT3 standard suspension version. Does not have the Z51 package. So this is probably about as comfortable as you'll get from a standard suspension Corvette, and it is very comfortable, and I think it still is a very dynamic package. You know, I haven't had any lack of grip here. I mean, there was one time we were accelerating earlier where it wanted to spin the tires a little bit, and I felt traction control intervening a little bit, but overall it does such a good job putting the power down. I mean, it should. It's got 305s in the back, and we have, you know, the engine over that rear axle, and you have, you know, only, you know, 495 horsepower, so fairly manageable, and so it's very approachable. There's nothing about this car that really scares you aside from the straight line acceleration. I'm finding that it's more comfortable and a little less intimidating than I was honestly expecting it to be. And I do think the more that I've been driving this car for a little while now, and I do think that the C7, especially with the manual and the fact that those had a more struggle putting the power down, I think it was a more visceral experience from an adrenaline standpoint because it wasn't as easy to go fast in the C7. It makes it so easy, and that's exciting. I mean, you're experiencing the G's, and it's very, very impressive. But I think it's a little less sketchy than the C7, which is kind of a funny thing to complain about. But I think that this does feel a little bit safer and a little more polished, which is fantastic for daily usability. And it still is fantastic. I am by no means complaining. It's just one little interesting thing that I noticed, and I think a lot of C7 owners will notice, especially if you're coming out of a manual transmission car. Obviously, you lose some involvement with these paddle shifters, but it does do such a great job. Another thing I want to add about this dual clutch is that the more that I've been driving, it seems like the transmission has gotten smoother the more that it was warmed up. When we were first pulling away from the hotel, I did notice there was a little bit of clunkiness, and there was some times where it wasn't perfectly smooth. But now, even in sport mode, it's pretty smooth, pretty responsive. I still find myself feeling like the GT500's dual clutch was a tad bit sharper and a little bit crisper, but I'm really, really splitting hairs here. I mean, because this is still, I mean, manual mode, sport mode, immediate downshifts, no complaints. Immediate upshifts. It is very, very, very quick. I think what I'm noticing is it's just a little. I think they just programmed this transmission to smooth out the shifts a little more in automatic mode than what the GT500 does. But it is so perfect. I'm really, really nitpicking to even try and find things that I'm not 100% pleased with. But this is, everything about this vehicle is just so, so impressive. And yeah, I absolutely love driving it. But so this is all my driving impressions here on the road, but we're going to be also hitting the track tomorrow, and I'll have more impressions there. And after tracking the car for 2 sessions of about 8 laps each, I came away really impressed. By the time my group had gotten into these cars, they'd already been lapping the track for about an hour or so, and yet in my sessions, I still didn't experience any noticeable brake fade. All the track cars had the Z51 package with the bigger brakes, but I'm not sure if my Rapid Blue example here had magnetic ride or not. Regardless though, the brakes weren't the only thing that impressed. The car was so planted and stable on track, and the grip was really good. If you weren't careful, you could feel it wanting to understeer a bit, but even just letting up on the gas a little bit immediately brought grip right back to that front end. And again, for a standard Corvette, the limits were pretty high. That grip also meant that I didn't have to worry about the back end stepping out on me if I got on the gas too early on corner exit. It just gripped and went. And there's a couple of times in track mode where the traction control held me back for a second or two, but it didn't feel like the car had to rely on those electronics as much as it did in the past models. And comparing this to lapping like a CTS-V around this same track 3 years ago, with that car, I had to constantly manage the back end wanting to squirm around. And with the C8 here, there were no such issues. Obviously, the Corvette has less power, but the innate balance in the Corvette is really noticeable. And the C8 also felt much more planted on track than the Supra I tracked last year, for example, which felt much more playful with its constant desire to drift around. And the last thing to mention, though, about the track and stuff is that the optional performance data recorder has been upgraded to a 1080p camera now. Unfortunately, for some reason, my footage recorded in standard definition here, but it is a nice improvement there. And there's also another cool feature where it now has the ability to function as a dash cam, where it can either record constantly whenever you drive or whenever it's just in valet mode. But either way, that's a great feature to have too. But overall, the Corvette is a fantastic sports car. After 2 days of driving, the only minor gripes I had were that the performance exhaust could be a little louder in my opinion, and that while the engine is a great performer, it doesn't feel as special as engines in cars like the Shelby GT350 and the GT500 with their high red lines and intoxicating sounds. But thankfully, based on the rumors, it sounds like the Z06 might improve those aspects, and that's probably already in the works. But in the meantime, the Corvette Stingray is still the best performance bargain us enthusiasts have ever seen, in my opinion, and they could have charged double what they're asking for these things, and I'd still think it was a solid deal. It is that good. It's crazy to think that this is only the beginning of the mid-engine Corvette story, and it's only going to get better from here. What a time to be alive. Thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.